Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Week in Review. We are so glad to have you with us all. Have you all with us today? Excuse my poor syntax there. I'm only on my second cup of coffee. With us today, we have a slightly smaller crew, but still a robust one nonetheless. We've got Christian, our editor in chief, and Tim, our other editor, Nivesh from research, as well as Ant from research, and our trader Nathan. Mitchell may be joining us later. We'll see. But yeah, let's get things started. It was um, a surprisingly big week this week. Last week, obviously, we had the lead up to the merge and then the merge itself, and lots of hype and attention surrounding that. And as you all are aware, as it kind of fizzled out and the event was done, it seemed as if there were no real new or continuing narratives to latch on to. So, what are we going to talk about now? Well, this week, the United States government gave us plenty to talk about, and that's what we're going to do today. Um, I think all of the regulatory news we're going to talk about is going to focus on this. Although there's a bill in the UK pending as of yesterday to increase, or rather, to empower authorities to crack down on crypto crime as well. That one's a little less specific, I guess, than some of the things that the U.S. has put out this week, but all the same, developments on both sides of the Atlantic. On our side of things, probably the first major story this week was one that, it's one of these sneaky things, right? Like, it's a story that seemed relatively normal at first, and then you dig into it and it seems a little bit alarming. And that was the SEC filed a lawsuit against a YouTuber, Ian Bellina. You guys may recall he was a YouTuber during the ICO era that was involved with a project called Sparkster. Essentially, what's happening here, the broad strokes, is that the SEC is accusing Bellina of basically failing to disclose his token holdings and also his Spark tokens, that is, for the Sparkster platform that he was more or less shilling. They also allege that he sold some of his tokens, which I suppose the argument there would be the selling of unregistered securities to the public. Anyway, that's all pretty run of the mill. What's interesting about this, though, is that the SEC made a very bizarre claim in the text of the lawsuit that that everyone rightly honed in on. And it was this line here, quote, at that point, Spark investors' ETH contributions were validated by a network of nodes on the Ethereum blockchain, which are clustered more densely in the United States than in any other country. As a result, those transactions took place in the United States. Boom. Okay, so that's what the SEC wants to take to court. This argument that because Ethereum nodes are most densely clustered, not a majority of Ethereum nodes, not, or even, well, I guess technically a plurality. But when we ran the numbers on this, we found that, it was about 42% of Ethereum nodes were operating in the United States. That's not a majority. So the SEC's logic here seems, at this point, I'm going to open it up to the group and let's want to discuss what the angle is here, because it seems to me like that argument is pretty, I don't want to say shaky, but it does seem like a bit of a leap. And I don't think I'm the only one who is getting that feeling from it. So, let's start with this, you guys. What is going on here? What is the SEC up to? What do you think is going to come of this? Anyone want to take the bait first, or should I go around the table? Or is it just not a compelling enough question?
I guess I'll jump in on this one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. A bit surprising to start off with that, but not. It isn't. It isn't. I'll explain my thoughts. The SEC have repeatedly done similar things like this, where they will put forward some kind of case, usually something that's very easy for them to win, because in crypto there's a lot of instances of malpractice or people skirting securities laws, especially in the US, where they're quite tight and the regulatory bodies crack down on them. quite a lot. So they got a lot of good targets that they can go after if they are aware of them. And this seems to be another one of them. Someone who was promoting an ICO on Ethereum back in 2017 and didn't disclose, broke bank secrecy acts, and kind of, I think that's what it was. A lot of kind of shady stuff going on there. But they'll try and slide in something to set precedent, right? And this is exactly the case where it seems like they've got an easy win. No judge is going to, rule against them in this case because it's obvious that this guy was guilty. But yeah, if they can get that piece of wording through that says, yeah, we believe all Ethereum transactions are happening in the US because like 42% of validators are reportedly like based in the US, then it sets this precedent going forward where they could potentially use that to bring Ethereum under SEC jurisdiction, for example, or any other number of tokens on Ethereum. Any ERC20, even, you could imagine this extending to NFTs as well. The possibilities are endless, and, it's definitely something that the SEC has been eyeing for some time now. It's no secret that Gary Gensler, chair of the SEC, wants heightened authority over crypto assets, despite what the crypto space, crypto people, what they called the lobbying agency, Coin. Someone help me out here, please. I'm completely blanked on it.
CoinDesk.
No.
I'd have to look it up.
But has a jumper of them. What is it? It's no one knows.
The Coin Foundation.
The lobbying agency for crypto.
Coin Center.
I know
Coin Center.
Thank you.
I was thinking of like the Government Blockchain Association, but they don't really do a whole lot.
Coin Center,
Okay.
yeah. So like
Coin
they're
Center. Okay.
obviously trying to, they're not very happy with what the SEC is doing here, and that they're putting forward, these lobbying efforts to try and get a more fair and reasonable regulatory framework for crypto. So I guess that's my take on it. Yeah, it's another sort of underhanded attempt. Tom said in his piece it was like they're ruling through enforcement, and seems to be another classic case of that. Do I think they'll get away with it? I don't think so. I think that they've tried this before and it hasn't been very successful. But I imagine, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here just for a moment, that their interests on Wall Street that are in with the SEC, as we undoubtedly there are. They need to earn their rent. They need to earn their keep. So I think that they will continue pushing these kind of lawsuits with certain, trying to get through wins against crypto so that they can gain more control over it. But they, I don't think that they will ultimately result in anything meaningful, but they have to keep doing it to keep their interests happy, I imagine. I think that's everything I've got for the moment.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I mean, I think a pretty fair assessment of what's going on here. We ran a Twitter poll yesterday that some of you may have seen about what we think the community's ultimate game, or what the community thinks Gary Gensler's ultimate aim is in these sort of actions. And one of the prominent choices was to bring Ethereum under the jurisdiction of the SEC. I think that last I checked the poll, that was the clear winner, but it's been probably since last evening since I checked it. Yeah, I think it's also important to kind of revisit something that happened at the end of last week, and it's kind of gotten buried a little bit, but within 24 hours of the merge, if you guys recall. Let's see. The merge happened early Thursday morning. It was Friday afternoon that Gensler said something, made more comments about ETH being considered a security. I don't know what, I can't remember what his exact comments were, but they were along those lines. And the next day, the Treasury and the Justice Department both put out their reports to the White House that were ordered by Biden's executive order back in March. I personally don't think, though, that timing is a coincidence, to kind of borrow Tim's tinfoil hat for a minute. I guess like just before we move on to something else, like do you guys like let's revisit this idea of like Ethereum post merge. There's more regulatory action that seems to be coming immediately in the wake of it. Do you guys think that the merge and the shift to proof of stake qualitatively affects Ethereum standing with regulators? Do you think the SEC has a leg to stand on in claiming that Ethereum is a security? And I guess the big question is why or why not? Christian, as our local ETH enthusiast, I know you must have some feelings on this. What are they?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think it's necessarily coincidental that Gensler said that, like a day or so after the merge. I would reiterate that he didn't directly mention Ethereum. He tends to
Okay,
shy away from doing that, is similar
that's
to
true.
stuff he's said in the past. So he said something, I guess, quite like vague before, where he was like, "Oh, Bitcoin is the only asset that I would say is a commodity, like the only crypto asset." So yeah, as for the White House stuff, I I don't think that don't think they were like, "Oh, the Ethereum merge is happening, let's get all this together," just because there were like so many agencies involved, and I think that would be a very difficult thing to do. And just that, with the big announcements like this, they probably had it scheduled like before even the merge was. So but yeah, as for SEC, yeah, I mean, I've been watching what Gensler says for a long time, and when I looked at the poll that we put up as well, I mean, I voted kill DeFi, like what is Gensler's ultimate goal. But yeah, I could just have easily have voted, ETH under SEC control, because yeah, that's how it appears to me. Whether the change to proof of stake will make give the SEC more like ground for this. I'm not sure about that really. Like, there's obviously that 2018 speech where sort of one of them said that it's become I forget the guy's name, become like more decentralized over time, and wouldn't qualify as one. Yeah, I mean, I haven't really seen Gensler sort of use that argument that like the change to proof of stake would make it so. Unless I'm like not up to speed with that. If the argument is that it becomes like more centralized, yeah, I mean that's something I've seen more from like Bitcoin people than the SEC so far. So if they do use that, like, I'm just curious about what they would sort of say as the reasoning for that. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Hi DB, I can see your request in, so I'll invite you up.
Yeah, let's get you up here, DB. Hey man, how's it going?
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would add that for people who don't know me, I'm a lawyer in the space and deal with a lot of these issues and work with some of the trade associations. And there's a prevailing view that the commission is trying to formulate a rationale for why staking, should fall under their purview and is sort of a securities-like activity. So it could be part of a broader narrative of, by Ethereum becoming proof of stake and then the whole staking process itself, that action itself, being something that is securities like, and for them to have some control over it or set rules around it. The other thing I just wanted to say is there are a lot of bills floating around Congress right now. There's one in the Agriculture Committee looking at sort of creating rules around commodities platforms, and they're looking at targeting crypto platforms and regulating them. And it's sort of a little bit of death by a thousand cuts, that they're trying to take different pieces and bring it under their umbrella.
I see. Okay.
That's
Well,
helpful. Interesting.
yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And while we have you up here, uh, first of all, thanks for identifying yourself as a lawyer, and of course, everyone listening. None of this is legal advice, but since you do have some expertise, what I would be curious about is that, yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, DB, staking. There seems to be an analog between staking and sort of investing in a traditional. There seems to be, like, you use the term securities like, right? I I can see how that makes sense, but what are some qualitatively what are some things that make a proof of stake system qualitatively different from a traditional securities contract, insofar as your knowledge can elucidate that for us?
Yeah, and again, like you said, and I appreciate, I'm not giving legal advice. Look, I don't
Right.
think the idea of, staking, like, I think there's different types of staking. So I think the staking that gets done, like if you are staking to be a validator for we'll call it more of an active staker. I think doing things where you're sort of actively supporting a protocol and being a validator and you're staking your crypto in that approach, I think that's one of the stronger reasons why it wouldn't be a security. But where you're sort of staking passively and earning some return for just the passive staking, I think that flavor of it might be closer to something that they would want to grab their hands around and say it's more securities like. Like, I think the consensus on this call with the group is that we all don't think that it's, should be treated as a security. But I think wherever there's this passive activity and that there is some rewards or return for that passive activity, I think those are the ones that are closer to areas where, they can make, assumptions or make some, create some theories about why it may be a security.
Okay. So there are some pretty fine distinctions here that I mean, I'm sure not these can't be lost on everybody at the SEC, so it's difficult to suss out, who there is thinking of in these more nuanced terms and who there is thinking in terms of it's all securities. But I think it does illustrate that, none of this securities question is far from settled. It seems pretty plain to me that current securities law just is not quite adequate. And again, not a legal expert here, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But it seems the fact that we're having these arguments tells me that our current definitions are not suitable to this technology and these concepts.
I
Do you
will
think
say
that's fair, or am I
this.
going too far? Go ahead.
I will say this. The pooling concept is a concept that the securities laws contemplate in a different context.
Okay.
So the idea of pooling resources together and getting rewarded from that pooling is something that they've argued and tried to make the analog for as a security.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of the three, the pooling is the one where they feel like there's closest analog. I think when you're acting as a transaction validator is sort of the furthest away from where their view of the law is. But, it feels like their view is that they'd like to consider all of these securities type activities. So I see three buckets personally. One is pooled revenue. One is proof of stake that's like inflationary. And then one is proof of stake where you're acting as like a transaction validator. So that's how I intellectually break up the three. And this is just me talking. This isn't, as I think about it. But those are the distinctions that I see. But I could see the one where it's just pooled revenue being the easiest of the three for them to make arguments.
Okay. So I'm going to think about this a bit. While I do, anybody have any immediate reactions to that?
Yeah, I guess it's like
yeah.
it's like interesting, like to hear you speak about that, and also really good to have you up on the stage. Yeah, just like the choice of language, that word validator, like we merely validate the transactions. Is kind of like and you sort of think about the meaning of that word, it kind of has this implication that, I don't know, in a way, there's almost no responsibility for the transactions. Is that kind of like the way that you see it, or the way that you think about it?
I mean, I sort of like, let's to be clear, like I am on team crypto side and don't want to see any of these thought about as securities. But I think where you're acting passively and you're in a pool and you're just sort of acting passively, I think that has much more of a securities feeling to them than like taking an active role as a validator where you can say, I have to do certain actions and I'm rewarded for those actions. And in other analogs, being rewarded for taking an action doesn't make it a security.
Right. And isn't a critical part of the Howey test that income for investors basically is derived from the effort
The efforts of
right?
others, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that looks pretty, yeah. Okay.
Well, look, I would, but by the way, I wouldn't let that prong suddenly make you feel that staking is a security. I'm just saying
sure.
that,
No.
that of all those three categories that I arbitrarily have made, well, it wasn't arbitrary to me, but the three categories as I see them, that's the continuum of what I think is closest to maybe being a security and furthest away.
Gotcha. Navesh, I see you unmuted. What do you got for us, sir?
Yeah. Sir, can you please explain like how like they view inflation? Because I didn't understand that part. Like your second category where they view staking and the inflationary reward as that.
Well, I think there's some tokens where, like, I think we can all agree there's a universe of tokens where, you just stake and you get rewards. And then there's some where you stake and, you act as a validator and, there's that. But there's some middle ground where you stake, but there are activities that you have to take to, whether it's trade on the platform or there are other things in addition to staking, or where, actions taken reduce or increase the amount of, tokens on the platform, or some actions that you're taking in between doing nothing and in between being like a validator that I think warrant being put in like a second category.
Gotcha.
Well, thanks, DB. Really appreciate you kind of helping us unpack some of this stuff. We're not done talking to the SEC, but we do need to move on to the next story, which also involves the SEC. So yesterday on a Fox Business interview, Brad Garlinghouse, CEO of Ripple, and we all, I'm sure most of us are familiar with the ongoing saga between Ripple and the SEC. Went on an interview to basically, let's say, share some sharp criticisms of the SEC's handling of the case. He used the phrase "cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs," which was the standout quote on Twitter yesterday in relation to the SEC. This case, like we've been following SEC and Ripple for a long time, like 3 years now, I think, and the crux of that case is whether or not Ripple, issued an unregistered securities offering. I think about 1.3 billion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was about that. So there's a lot on the line in this case. It's kind of the first. Well, Tim, you have been involved in this as well, so I'll turn it over to you. But basically, tell us what the implication is here, and how are people responding to the ongoing Ripple saga, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try and break it down. So as you said, it's an ongoing case. I'm sure we've all heard about how the SEC, it's the first major lawsuit against like a crypto project or company, as far as I know, but dating back to 2020. And yeah, it's weighed on the XRP token for a long time. Some people would say it's depressed its price. But at the same time, Ripple, or Ripple Labs Incorporated, the company behind the blockchain, they've been doing rather well over the years. If you've been following it, you'll see they've made some ground against the SEC. The judge has ruled in their favor on quite a few things. And yeah, it appears like now the case may be coming to its conclusion within the next few months. So what happened, I think, on Monday was both the SEC and Ripple Labs filed for an executive judgment from the judge of the case. And so what this would do is they would sort of take all the information, the judge would take all the information that's currently been submitted, and then just the judge make a ruling on the case one way or the other. And that's instead of it going to a trial with lawyers and more evidence and all the other stuff that comes along with that. So if this is accepted and they are granted an executive judgment, it would mean that the case should resolve by around mid-December, I think, is the estimate that I've seen some people floating around. So how does this all fit with what's been happening this week? Yeah. If you've been watching the markets, you'll have seen XRP has defied the market this week. There's no other way to put it. It's up about 50%. It was higher before. I think it's come back down a little bit. So, traders, investors are clearly, seeing this as something very bullish. They're really excited. And I think it's because right now it looks like Ripple will win the case. And, that sets a precedent. The SEC tried to say that the XRP offering was an unregistered securities offering. The judge says it isn't. So that will allow a lot of other projects, I imagine, to sort of maybe breathe a bit easier or, be a bit more relaxed about potential enforcement. And it's sure to be, a very good feel-good moment for the crypto space as well. And it could have implications on other assets, particularly Ethereum that we were just talking about. Again, I really don't have any knowledge of the law, especially in the US, apart from like surface level understanding. But I'm sure that it will be a very relevant case, a landmark case, so to speak, in crypto. And so that, I think, has all led up to Brad Gelling? I can't remember his name. The Ripple CEO. Garlinghouse, that's his name. Thank you.
Yeah.
Going on Fox Business and being rather cocky, calling out the SEC, telling them that they've lost their way and all that kind of stuff. Because I think he knows that it's very likely, potentially like almost certain, that Ripple will win the case. Again, he may think that he's in whether that's the truth of the matter remains to be seen until the decision is made. But that seems to be where we're at right now, what the market thinks. And yeah, the price of XRP over the last few days seems to reflect what the market participants think will be the likely outcome.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, the Ripple case is one that I followed sort of off and on, but I kind of, like, from a personal perspective, it's an example of kind of reading what the market is doing to give me a sense, or at least, how do I say this, my judgment about how this case is going. The really the best barometer I have to judge by is both, the news as it becomes public and what the market is doing. And as Tim said explicitly, XRP has defied all expectations this week. It's also worth noting, I have to check the chart, but this uptrend has been going, it preceded Garlinghouse's rather snarky comments yesterday. So I guess, let's open this up to the group. I obviously, we want to be careful about predicting the future, but just from the perspective of like gut feelings, everyone here has been in this space a long time, and intuition is not totally invaluable. So what are your feelings about this, you guys? Do you have the sense that this is going in the direction we want it to, or do you think there's still some hidden roadblocks we might not be anticipating? Okay, I'll try again.
I
Yeah,
can
DB.
jump in again.
Oh,
Share some more thoughts on it, I guess. Like, will there be any roadblocks? Personally, I don't think so. And
yeah,
I
I don't
think
know what I was
that's
thinking with
why
that
there's
question.
such
I don't know if that'd
a
be.
big reaction to it. But I thought maybe an interesting point is like the way that I'm currently thinking about it right now is that it could be like a very good narrative for crypto space to latch onto. Oh, DV, you're unmuted. Do you have anything to say?
You know, I just wanted to say a couple of quick things just to put some texture around it. The reason why these summary judgment motions are important is because the facts are not really at question. It's really the law behind the application of the facts to the law and how the court sees it. So I think people feel more of the view that the court will decide one way or the other on the summary judgment motion rather than, you know, punt it to a jury because the facts really aren't at issue. It's just really the application of the law. The other thing I would say is if Ripple were to win, I don't know if the FCC would just stop there and not appeal it. But obviously it would be a big enough win and they'd have a burden to appeal it. But it's just something to think about with timing. You know, a couple of data points for everybody to think about.
DB, while we have you up here, and I don't know how the extent of your experience dealing with the SEC, so this may be out of your wheelhouse. But do you have any insight on the level of expense the government and the SEC has to go through in order to bring this case? Like, would it be worth it to appeal? Let's say Ripple got the SEC just got shut down in the summary judgment. Do you think there's a political will in the SEC to launch or to mobilize the resources, manpower, money, et cetera, to appeal this judgment?
Well, you know,
Is that
it's
too
so
hard?
hard to prognosticate what
Yeah.
an agency's view is, but based on just public statements made by Gensler as chairman, I think it goes two ways. Either one, he fights Ripple to the end, or he says, you know, this lawsuit was brought before we joined and I became the commissioner. And so, you know, kind of rationalize why he's wiping his hands clean from it. I don't think it stops their overall agenda of wanting to sort of really regulate crypto as harshly as possible. But I'm sure there will be some narrative around it if they don't take the case further. But it feels like in for a penny, in for a pound. And, you know, you have career people working at the commission on various commission matters. So, you know, they very well may just say, you know, we're going to take this to the end. The last thing I'd say is whoever wins, you know, whoever wins in Congress in the midterms, changing of the party, and I'm just talking about crypto only. I don't want to talk about all the other issues, but you know, Republican-led House or Senate is likely to be more crypto friendly than the current administration has formed.
Cool. Thanks, DB. Any other thoughts on Ripple? We've got another lawsuit to talk about. This is not the only. Well, I guess we've got three lawsuits to talk about today. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I would just say I'm hopeful for Ripple in this. I imagine I speak for many people that follow this space when I say that. There are some things that some, I would say, questionable statements that like Garlinghouse has made in the past, where I remember he went against the when there was like a lot of commotion around Bitcoin and mining. I think he supported the like Greenpeace campaign or something like this, and was like very critical of Bitcoin at the time, and there was something similar with Ethereum. But nonetheless, hopeful for them. You see what I mean? It's kind of, you would think he would sort of be supportive of the whole space. But yeah, I would add as well. Yeah, I would be quite surprised if they didn't win based on some of the stuff we've seen come out in recent months. Yeah, so something we were talking about just before this call. We remember in July when the judge basically said that it described the SEC as engaging in hypocrisy because of their like tactics and the way it it was like the denial for the SEC's motion to keep the like Hinman speech about ETH like a secret, and yeah, the judge sort of went against them on that. So yeah, as I say, I wouldn't be too surprised if like Tim has suggested, if it goes yeah, Ripple's way. But yeah, we'll see.
Thanks, Christian. And yeah, it's as we mentioned before the call, when the judge in the case starts pointing out what shaky grounding you're on, it's not a good sign for you know, it's not necessarily a death blow, but it's not encouraging. Last thoughts on Ripple before we move on to actually the CFTC. We're going to change regulatory bodies.
I'll finish my thought from earlier. It's not specifically to do with the case, but more of its implications in the crypto space in general. As I could see it becoming the new narrative that, you know, everyone latches onto because the merger's passed, and we saw that Ethereum ran up quite a lot in anticipation, but then it was kind of a sell the fact kind of thing. You know, not investment advice in any way, shape, or form, but I could definitely see something similar to that happening for Ripple and XRP. I could see it being all of this hype leading up to the decision. People are expecting it to like go back to all-time highs or something, even though we've got such an abysmal economic backdrop. And then, yeah, when the decision is made for if Ripple does win, yeah, I could imagine people just selling their tokens at that point, because then there's nothing to look forward to. There's no hype anymore. You know, just in the same way as what happened to Ethereum after the merge.
Yeah, Navesh?
Yeah, I would like to add that's a very great point, because before this lawsuit, Ripple was like, the lawsuit started just at the helm of the bull market, and even then there was no usage and there was no narrative around Ripple that time. And I think DeFi was becoming more popular. NFTs were just coming up. So I think even without the lawsuit, Ripple wouldn't have like such a great moment as it did in 2017. So yeah, and I think Cardano is the new XRP, right? So yeah, who cares about it?
Well, that's actually a good point. Like, especially if Ripple ends up winning its case, this could end up being the best PR for that blockchain that they could have hoped for, right? Like, if Ripple wins, then they're a giant killer then. And yeah, while I see Tim's point that it could be very easily be a sell and news event, I don't think that feather in Ripple's cap is going to hurt them in the long run, assuming they win. Final thoughts. All right, moving on. We got a slightly more complicated case that we're going to talk about next. This broke last night, and we're still unpacking it ourselves. But this was a case from the CFTC against a small, against a DAO this time. And Christian, you read up on this a little bit before the call. Can you kind of give us a breakdown of what the CFTC is up to alongside the SEC?
Yeah, sure. Now, yeah, I'm also still trying to digest this, but it relates to Uki DAO, which was originally B0X. So it's like a leverage trading exchange. And yeah, the CFTC is effectively claiming that the founders of this offered leverage and margin products illegally, just because like it hadn't registered, and yeah, it says they failed to adopt a customer identification program as part of the Bank Secrecy Act, and that was required. And it's an issue. It's order of a fine of $250,000, and like a cease and desist as well on like further activities. Some interesting points to this. So one of the quotes from a rep from CFTC says, this is part of the CFTC's broader efforts to protect US consumers in a rapidly evolving decentralized finance environment. So sort of hinting at, this is only the start kind of thing of what's to come. And from every sign I've seen, like the sort of things we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes, it does feel like, there is like, I guess, like an uphill battle ahead, or like, this isn't just, this isn't like the end of it. There's going to be a lot more of these things. They also said, same guy, acting director of enforcement, Gretchen Lowe, margin leverage or finance digital asset trading offered to retail customers in the US must occur on properly registered and regulated exchanges in accordance with applicable laws and regulations. And it says that this applies to both the DAO and when it was like when it was just B0X. These transactions were unlawful because they were required to take place on a designated contract market. And it's basically saying that they broke the law in setting up this project. And one of the interesting parts of this is a quote where it says, Commission defines the Uki DAO unincorporated association as holders of Uki tokens that voted on governance proposals with respect to running the business. Now this is the major part, and this is something that is really quite interesting and would be unprecedented if this was accepted, because sort of going after the exchange is one thing, and that's bad for the exchange, sure, but that is not something we haven't seen before. To implicate token holders for, say, voting in this kind of thing, that's extreme, right? Because it's like you could just have you could have bought these tokens on Uniswap or wherever it was, and say you voted on a proposal to for token holders to receive certain rewards. So you vote on that. I'm not that familiar with this DAO or the exchange, so maybe they don't have that sort of thing on their governance board. But you may have voted in that. But according to this ruling from the CFTC, that makes you a part owner in this thing, and therefore you're to blame for all the illegal products they're offering, right? And then that raises questions about every other DAO and every other DeFi project. When Tornado Cash got sort of banned last month, what some of the questions people were raising is like, oh, well, what if Uniswap is next, or Ethereum? And that sounds pretty extreme, but if this goes through and it's like, oh, the token holders are responsible, then where does this stop, right? Because it could be like any of these DeFi projects, and then you have it. Maybe they decide that something like Uniswap, because there was Shiba Inu coin or whatever it is, Shiba Inu derivative. No offense to any Dogecoin holders, but something that was like a rug pull or something like this, an illegal project. So then they decide that a decentralized exchange that it was hosted on was like allowing this illegal activity, because that's effectively what they did to Tornado Cash, what some would argue. So then you have it that like uni holders are suddenly responsible because they voted in a thing for this. I'm kind of speaking in the future and like potentially of how things dark it could get, and this might sound quite Black Mirror, but like this is the potential path it could go down if based on like what we've seen and the what they're indicating. Now, is it going to be that extreme? Perhaps not. And yeah, we've seen these positive indications of like, Janet Yellen last week acknowledging the significant opportunities and this kind of thing. But at the same time, there are a lot of alarm bells or should be a lot of alarm bells in people's heads at the moment over this stuff because, yeah, it's pretty extreme, and I would say almost, heading towards the risk of just a more like authoritarian way of doing things. We saw the emergence of DAOs last year and stuff like Constitution DAO, and there was Free Ross DAO, right? So yeah, Ross Ulbricht famously set up Silk Road, regarded by many in the Bitcoin space as like a sort of pioneer that helped bring it mainstream, but obviously was behind a marketplace like the world's biggest drug marketplace. But yeah, what if people who participated in Free Ross DAO suddenly, because they tried to get Ross out of prison, you see what I mean? Like there are just a lot of fears I have about where things are heading, and sorry to maybe sound too extreme or like project like these fears in such a like blunt way, but yeah, I think people should be concerned by this kind of thing.
Yeah, Christian, like you guys know me. When something like regulatory news comes out, I'm usually the first to say like, hold on, it's probably not as alarmist. It's probably not as bad as we think it is, right? There's still a long way to go for any of this stuff becomes real. But this one seemed pretty aggressive to me for precisely the reason you outlined. I've wondered basically since DAOs became a thing, like a question that I've had in my mind is, okay, well, who is accountable when these things go wrong or when someone breaks the law? It doesn't make sense that everyone who owns the token is responsible for something going wrong. That's almost like saying, this may be a poor analogy, but if there's a guy knocking off music stores and stealing musical instruments, and then he turns around and he's selling them on eBay secretly, right, or something like that, and I order a guitar from him, and I pay for it, and I buy a guitar over eBay, am I culpable for owning a stolen guitar? Like, this other guy is the one that did something really shifty and sort of move this market in an illicit direction. I think there's a similar thing going on with like an exchange or like a DAO like this. Like, is it fair to burden retail customers with the culpability of the person they're buying from having done something wrong? Does that seem right? I guess that's not fair. It seems like your silence tells me that nobody really thinks that should be right. But I guess a good question is where's the accountability with DAOs? What have you got? Maybe not an answer to that question, but
yeah, I wasn't going to answer that question, but I was just kind of build on what Christian was saying, and kind of like I do totally get the way that people are feeling about this. Like I am too. I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago with one of, I can't remember the exact person I was listening to, unfortunately, but it was possibly someone who was in charge of Flashbots or one of the high up developers there, and they were having this conversation about regulation and so on. And the kind of point that came out of that was that it's almost like if you're an American company now, you've got to be careful, an American crypto company, you've got to be careful that what you're doing doesn't result in one of your employees getting a bang on the door one morning from the police and being hauled away and thrown in jail. Like, yeah. And it's that kind of same thing. If I buy a stolen goods, I didn't know they were stolen. Is it really my fault? And it's kind of like, I just work for this company. Where do all these liabilities lay? And I do feel like from the Tornado Cash up until today, it does feel like there's I don't know, like an almost coordinated range of efforts from a variety of like government agencies. They're almost, I don't know, like, can you call it a harassment of the space? Like, it just kind of seems to keep going, and it just seems to me like they're just going to keep chipping away until they find the thing that's frightening enough or that sticks, that just dissuades people and so on. I don't think their ultimate goal is to shut the space down. I'm sure, and I know this may not make immediate sense because these government agencies are not necessarily responsible for taxation, but I'm sure the ultimate goal of this is to get crypto taxed as much as possible within the US. And of course, everyone should pay their taxes anyway, but like how much that actually happens, I don't know. And I bet they see a lot of opportunity to allow the space to grow as long as they can get their kind of like pound of flesh out of it in terms of tax.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's what this is all aimed at: shutting things down, frightening people, almost bullying people into compliance.
Yeah, that's worth noting. I think I saw yesterday or the day before the IRS actually got a ruling from a judge that allows them to, it's going to allow them to go after people who, well, going way back, I guess, as far as they want to go, people who have used cryptocurrency to dodge their taxes. And you may have seen people on crypto Twitter becoming very irate about this, but it's kind of like one of those things you said, and like you should have known that you had to pay taxes on this, and to think that you didn't is to just sort of willfully ignore rules that you know are there. So, yeah, I think there's going to be some kind of synthesis that comes out of this. The space will fight back probably pretty hard, well, extremely hard, I'm sure, because they're true believers here, and believers will fight. I think it's unlikely that the government will be able to completely institute a completely draconian system, but they are going to test the waters, I think, to see how much they can get away with exerting control of the space. We've got 2 topics left, but really only time left for one more. So just real quickly before we talk about markets, worth mentioning that there are a few stablecoin bills in the House or in Congress generally. One specifically that was revealed this week, a stablecoin bill would put a 2-year moratorium on. I've forgotten it again. Somebody help me out. It was endogenously collateralized stablecoins. Is that right?
Not quite. Is
endogenously
collateralized.
Okay. Well, yeah. So that's raised some alarm. It's worth noting that all these bills are still in committee, which, under American law, committee means nothing yet, right? Like, it's still got a long way to go. But the fact that they're on the desks is notable. So I don't know. We might talk a little bit about that if we have time, but let's do so in the context of the markets, because we've got 5 minutes left. We always talk about the markets. Nathan, this is your moment. The merge is over. The market is struggling. There seems to be nothing on the horizon to give us much hope. What do we do? How do we move forward in this environment?
Yes, I think at the moment, I guess there's only one play, and that is to be defensive. I guess if you're already positioned long in the market, then it's going to be a very nervous time for you, especially when you see other currencies breaking down against the dollar. And if you look at the Federal Reserve, what they said in the week about the unemployment, it remains very low, and inflation is obviously very high. So I guess if you look at the 2008 crisis, then unemployment moved to 10%. Unemployment is currently around 3.7%. So just that fact alone tells you that the Federal Reserve is probably going to continue hiking rates aggressively, because it's obviously very concerned about the effect of rate hikes on the economy. So that is something that the market is starting to factor in, and we're seeing currencies breaking down against the dollar because obviously the United States economy is in much better shape than other economies. So they've got more room to to obviously hike rates and not affect the economy as much as others who are, say, for example, like European countries who are in quite a lot of trouble. So I think the market's starting to price that, and I don't know if anybody else is watching other asset classes today, but I think the British pound's fallen to its lowest level since 1985, and other currencies like the euro are breaking down as well, and we're seeing, European stocks hit over this Russian news. So I don't think there's a lot of hope for crypto unless we have something, like a CFTC regulatory announcement that was really positive, and like there was some type of time frame put on it for after this week's meeting. But apart from that, I don't see anything to stop the market going down, and I fully expect another 30 to 50% correction from current levels.
All right, that 30 to 50%. That's those are alarming numbers, Nathan.
It's okay, no worries.
Well, personally, I'm long on the space, so I'm not going anywhere. I'm not
Sorry
changing
about
anything.
that.
It's cool. This is a long-term game, man. Does this make anybody else nervous, or are we all long-termers?
You're leverage long because your job is in crypto as well.
That's fair. Yeah. Everyone here is long, right? Are there any exceptions, or anybody like playing? Or we have any like day-to-day traders playing around with options and shorts and that sort of thing in this crew?
I haven't been trading, no.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. Cool. So, we've got, I guess the short of it is maybe not the best week for the space, but as we've all made clear, there are believers here. It's a long-term game. I think everyone, at least in these conversations, has faith in the potential of the technology to really disrupt things. But, these weeks, these months have been hard, but in weeks like this, especially, can seem pretty bleak. But I don't want to leave us on that sad note. Does anybody have anything uplifting to add to that? Oh, come on, guys. There's got to be something positive I can say. Come on. What you got, Ant?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I was just going to make a bad joke. We'll get there in the end, won't we? Like it, maybe things will look different to the way they do now. Okay, but like it ain't going away. Like, and whilst I don't fully believe all the narratives around decentralization is unstoppable, and I don't believe that. I won't complain if it comes true, not at all. But I think we're going to see some sort of watered down version of kind of semi-regulated KYC. I don't know, whatever. That's where it'll end up, I think. But we're all still massively early. Like we're still well ahead of the curve, well ahead of the game, and we'll get the rewards out of being here now. And for hanging around in these hard times, it will pay off. There's no question. Regardless of what the space comes to look like in the future. Regulation will settle in, but then more money will come into the space once it's regulated. So it is up only after a down bit.
It's go up only, except for when it goes down.
Adoption is up only, hopefully, apart from the people who left since last year. I would just say as like another, I guess like a piece of advice to a degree is it's not a good time to like switch off, even if there is loads of negative news and reasons to feel negative at the moment. It's good to sort of engage with calls like this, even if it's not ours, like podcasts and other stuff that's happening. Follow people on Twitter and make friends there. Because at the moment, people have more time than they do in periods like we had in 2021. So make friends with people and like just don't sort of tune out because like you say, could be rewarded in the future when things pick up.
Yeah. Navesh, any last comments? See you unmuted, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, I was going to say NFTs are a legitimate assets now, and we have had a good run with stable coins. DeFi earned a lot of peeps, a lot of money and I haven't seen them going anywhere. So yeah, definitely we might have a slowdown period, but there's a lot to look forward to, and they might attack Ethereum, but I think Bitcoin is pretty much like has a green flag right now. So others are going to like try to achieve that status, and it'll come maybe after some time. But there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic, yeah. And we
Yeah.
can always expect like dollar failing and the end of the world to support like our cause as well. So yeah, that'll also come back. I think once the dollar has reached its peak, then we might see those people come up again, and like crypto should favor from it.
Thanks, Avesh. It calls to mind a book my mother used to read to me when I was very young. It was a Disney interpretation of basically Aesop's tortoise and the hare fable, and I remember it took place like it was like Goofy and some other Disney characters driving these cars, and Goofy drove a old beat ass jalopy, right? But he said to himself, and I never forgot this. I'll never forget it. Slow and steady, steady and slow. That's the way we always go. And I'll let you guess how the race turns out. All right. Wonderful conversation. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, DB, for hopping up on stage and volunteering your time. Appreciate it, sir. Christian, Navesh, Tim, Nathan, Ant, thanks to all of you for taking time out of your Friday to speak to our audience. Appreciate you all. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next week.